Hello and welcome to another episode of An Echo of Glory. This week we discuss constipation, expectation, and once again, that elusive donut. Welcome to An Echo of Glory, the Tottenham Hotspur podcast where the humour aspires to be just as dry as that Elland Road pitch. Joining me once again are Jake Robson and Gary Diamond.
Morning.
Gentlemen, hello.
Hello.
Right, straight in with the club news. We're going to start with that today. We'll go on to the men's team eventually. Women's team, 2-2 draw at West Ham. They finished 9th. Beth England scored twice. She basically is the Harry Kane of that ladies' team. Scores all the goals, basically. Finished 3rd top scorer in the WSL. Hopeful of a World Cup place. England have got a lot of injuries. So hopeful that Beth England can go to the World Cup this summer with England. The other thing that's happened in the club this week, Beyonce has started her, I don't know, tour, I don't know what it is, concert, I don't know. Again, I'm not down with the kids. They're singing some songs, but people are bothered by this, that the club should host these things. Does that bother you, Gary?
I mean, my wife's going tonight, so I've got the night off. So that's an absolute result for me.
Perfect. Jake, does that bother you?
No, I think it's great. You know what bothers me, actually? People that are bothered by it, because A, it brings money into the club.
Yeah.
And people suggest that, it means that, we're not a football club anymore. We're a concert venue. We're a boxing venue. It's great. I mean, the best stadium in the world is going to have to host other events.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Totally agree. I mean, it would bother me if I lived down the road and it was, keep me awake. But as you say, it's good for the club.
I think there's an irony in the people that sort of complain about it. Oh, it's an entertainment centre and it's not a football centre. The same people sort of then are the first ones I find to complain about the lack of sponsorship, when actually you've got the name Tottenham Hotspur Stadium above it at the moment. I'm upset about the lack of sponsorship because it's another lost revenue stream. But the idea that this is not a football stadium is absurd, and every club increasingly is going to be putting on events. We're seeing it already at other clubs, because as you enter the era of financial sustainability where you can only spend 70% of revenue, you need to maximise every revenue stream. It's just logic.
If I knew any Beyonce songs, I could have chucked in a Beyonce song.
No, you must know a Beyonce
All
song.
the single ladies?
There you go.
But I can't link that to Spurs.
Oh, I thought you said I can't link it to myself.
I'm not a single lady. Right, men's team. Season's over. We're all glad it's over.
We were having fun.
Well, I see. That chat, yeah. So back to the good stuff. Jake, give me something you were relieved about when it ended.
When the season ended, when the full-time whistle went at Elland Road, I was relieved that we were one step closer to next season. Right. Because I think next season is going to bring us more positivity than it's brought us this season, because it can only be better than this season.
You are the eternal optimist.
Yeah, I listen, as soon as this season was finished, it meant we were a step closer to next season.
No, I get
it. That's it. Just put this one to behind us in the bin, and let's move forward.
Well, we're going to dig into what hopefully makes us better next season. But Gary, give me something you were relieved about when it came to an end.
Are you talking about like this season or just generally?
Just generally, sorry, generally.
Constipation. When it came to an end.
I wasn't expecting that.
You were asking me, what was I relieved about when I
knew you had dental issues, but I didn't realise that.
Constipation. And if you think about it, actually, this season as an analogy was like constipation, wasn't it? It went on forever. Right. It was painful as hell. It was deeply frustrating, terribly emotional. There were times when
you wanted to lock yourself in a room.
You thought there were. You certainly do lock yourself in a room in those ones. But there were times when you thought there was light at the end of the tunnel. Let's not think about that too figuratively. But you're beating City 1-0 and you're thinking we're here, and then you get battered away to Leicester, and then you're beating West Ham and Chelsea 2-0, and you're thinking I'm through it. We're pushing through it, and then obviously you're going to lose 1-0 away to Sheffield United, and it just goes on and on with the nadir being, away to Newcastle, getting thumped 6-1, and this is the point where you're probably thinking, do I just reach up inside myself at this point and end this, and then finally,
I did not expect this thread.
Finally, a little bit of light relief at the end of it all that is almost imperceptible with a 4-1 win away to Leeds. I guess the divergence from this constipation analogy is that, when you have constipation, you generally don't have the happy ending that Lucas Moura offered us. So,
right, okay. So Jake's was next season's coming, Gary's was constipation. Did not expect those two answers.
You asked the question.
I did ask the question. I have to think. I know.
Ask me something, I'll give you the answer.
I know. Right, listen.
I have no shame.
You mentioned the 4-1 win at Leeds. I would like to remind you that I predicted a comfortable win for Spurs. And I'd also like to point out that you told me I didn't predict a draw against Brentford. I went back. I'm that petty. I did predict a draw against Brentford. Anyway, just to draw a line under that.
That's pretty petty.
Very petty.
Anyone would think you know what you're talking about.
No one would ever say that. So I watched the game.
I say I feel really stupid for predicting when I saw how Leeds not only set the team up in terms of the 11, but then when the game started, I actually felt embarrassed and ashamed that I'd said we would lose.
I predicted 2-2, and at 2-1, I thought, as dreadful as Leeds were, there was a genuine chance that it could be 2-2 and become the most pointless result of all time. But
I thought I watched the game, and then I know you did too, Gary. I thought we played okay. That was a really, really poor Leeds team. They did, I made the joke at the start, they seemed to let the grass grow and dry so we didn't play passing football because they knew we were going to counter them, and it did look like we countered slowly. I think we were very much on the beach, but Leeds were so poor. But it's good to end the season with a victory, right?
Yeah, of course it is. I mean,
you can't say no to that. Surely.
I mean, of course it is. It is scant relief and consolation for what has been a dreadful season. Again, Harry Kane's put on a bit of a masterclass, man of the match by a very, very long way, and just goes to show how important it is that he stays. And I think, if I look back on the season of very few lovely moments, we all have our thoughts on Lucas Moura. Arguably, he's cost us points that may have cost us, European football next season. But if you could have written an ending for somebody that will go down as a club legend, and rightly so, that was a beautiful moment.
It was. Are you talking about Everton when you say he cost us points?
More Liverpool. Everton, he got sent off for a silly challenge, but it's not his fault that a thunderbolt goes in. The pass against Liverpool, okay, that's only 1 point, but I think that would have just snuck us in, perhaps.
It's a bit harsh to put all that on him.
No, I'm not. Listen,
but it's just been the way his season's ended.
His season's gone, right? Yeah. And obviously, I'm not blaming our woes on Lucas Moura.
Stop blaming.
I'm not blaming our woes on Lucas Moura, of course, but I'm saying people had a little bit of anger and frustration towards him. Put all that to one side. He is a club legend, and if you could have decided how he would leave the club, you couldn't have written that goal.
I thought that was his kind of time at the club in a snapshot, in a little snippet, really, wasn't it?
An echo of glory.
An echo of glory.
Very good.
Well, dare I say it, a flash in the pan.
Well, when we signed him, you do that thing where you go on YouTube and you look at him. I knew who he was, but I hadn't spent much time watching his games. And he scored a lot of goals like that, or a lot of runs like that at PSG that didn't end in goals. That was such a Lucas Moura from like 5-6 years ago goal. We didn't see that much of that. Look, people aren't scoring from the halfway line every week, but I feel there was more to Lucas Moura. He has been a bit of a club legend, obviously for Ajax, but as we've talked about before, he is the kind of player that we are rightly moving on. These are the kind of players that we have to replace, and I don't think the squad needs to be better than just bit part players.
Well, yeah, of course, but you do need them. I think what he didn't do enough of was he was obviously more of a bench player than a first teamer, and he didn't have that much of an impact when he came on off the bench that often. I actually felt he was at his absolute best. That second goal he scored against Ajax, where he did that kind of jinked over the ball 3 or 4 times and smacked it in the corner, almost when he was acting on complete instinct.
Yes, which was what Sunday's goal was.
Absolutely, didn't have to. He didn't have time to think. Put him one-on-one maybe with somebody when one-on-one with a keeper, he'd fluff it, or maybe sometimes he'd go past a couple of people, then have a bit of space and then fluff the pass. You sort of saw him do that often. But yeah, when he was just in that absolute kind of moment of not thinking about anything, he was unstoppable sometimes. That goal on Sunday, I know Leeds were bad, but come on, that could have done for any defence.
Are we going to talk about the squad and players like Lucas Moura? Not in Europe we were in Europe 13 seasons in a row. So we're not in Europe this season. We've sort of discussed if that's a good or a bad thing. How easy is it going to be to keep a squad happy when you are playing, other than when you've got the League Cup and maybe the deeper rounds of the FA Cup once a week?
I think it's an opportunity, actually, because there has been the feeling over the last 13 seasons that perhaps we need to hoard these players for the long season. This might be an opportunity to actually cull the squad and really trim it of its fat.
But at the same time, it gives you less opportunities to play your your squad, and people like Richarlison, who aren't getting many games in the league and would come in the Champions League and the League Cup and the FA Cup, getting less opportunities.
I think that the season is still long enough, over 38 games. Plus, without Europe, I think it's an opportunity to make a real concerted tilt at the league and FA Cup. I think there'll be plenty of opportunities for a squad of 23 to 25 players. I mean, even that's quite a lot. But you get injuries, you get suspensions, you get loss of form, and so on and so forth. But I think the lack of European football means that we can really have that moment to do what's needed and cull the squad and trim it of its fat and get down to a core group of players who can be relied on. And as much as I have, some issues with Antonio Conte, which have been discussed on this pod, I think one of the things that he often said, particularly at the beginning, was, he knows the players he can rely on. And we can all imagine who those players may be, and there aren't enough of them. So this season coming up perhaps gives us that opportunity to really sort of focus on the players we can rely on, add to them with a few more we can rely on, so that when we get back into Europe, we're adding to a really strong foundation, hopefully. That's what I hope for this coming season.
Jake, when Villa were 2-1 up against Brighton, I was actually annoyed. I wanted us to finish in the European places. On the day when you saw that Villa finished above us and we finished 8th, now how were you when you realised there's no European tour this year or next year?
I was disappointed. I'm the same as you. I wanted us to finish in Europe. I'm never going to be one of those fans that says, I think we're better off out of Europe, because I think the point is obviously every fan wants us to be in the Champions League, and I think there's some fans that kind of, the lower down you go, they think there's no point. But of course, the lower down you go, the better the team you're going to be much better than most of the other teams in that, and the better chance you have of winning it. So I think we would have had a proper tilt at the Europa Conference League had we got into it, or had we qualified for it. So that's a bit disappointing, I think. But you can't deny there is the positive of not being in Europe is that you're going to have all week, whoever the manager is, to work with the squad. So I don't think I'm not like, oh yes, we're not in Europe, but I you're going to laugh, but I can take the positives from not being in Europe. And I think the positives are that you then don't have to worry about playing on a Thursday, Sunday. And I think as far as the squad players go, I think it's said a lot in sport. If your team is doing well and winning, then players are much happier if they're not playing or if they're not being given a go.
I agree.
And I think if whoever the new manager is, I hope that one of the boxes he ticks is obviously very good man manager. I mean, a lot of the younger, more progressive managers, that is part of the remit. You've got to be good with people, because players these days, it's more important, and that's kind of more what the job is about. So I think somebody comes in, galvanizes the squad, gets into the heads of some of the guys that might not be playing every week. And you know what? Someone like Richarlison, I think he's had a pretty good last couple of games. So I don't think he's necessarily going to be... I think him and Kulusevski almost have become slightly interchangeable. Maybe not on a 50-50 basis, but certainly, you could see Richarlison starting maybe 30-40% of the Premier League matches next season. Or at least I could. And if not that, certainly coming on and making an impact if he's fit.
Well, we need him to step up, I think, a little bit more in terms of the goals. But look, the season's over. We're going to do next week a much more in-depth season review. Quick review on this season, Gary. I mean, we all know it's been terrible, but quick review and player of the season. I think I know the answer to both, really.
The review of the season has to be just deep disappointment. Really, really, deep disappointment. I think we ended last season on a real high, real positive, and I think, if we're all being honest with ourselves, the transfer window in the summer, we all felt good about it. Signing players like Richarlison, like Basuma, known quantities in the Premier League that would add depth to the squad, as well as really sort of potentially impact the first team. I thought we were bouncing into the season with a huge amount of positivity. So what then ensued is really disappointing in just about every single way. It has been... This is not the worst Spurs team I have ever seen by a very, very long way. It is the Spurs team I have enjoyed the least by a very, very long way. And that comes down as well to the style of football that we've played. And I think it forever puts to bed that question of, do we sacrifice good football for end result? The answer for me forevermore now will be no. We have to get that end result through playing good football. On the player of the season, there's only one player that it can be. Had Bentancur stayed fit, he's the only one that was stepping up to challenge Harry Kane for that player of the season. And had he stayed fit, I think he could have run Kane close, but such was the form of Harry Kane, you'd have to be almost godlike to have performed better in one player of the season.
I think that says it all. Normally you can go, last season you can go Kane or Son, that would have divided opinion. In the good old days, you said, Alderweireld, Vertonghen, you had so many. The fact that there was literally one player you could pick from says it all. Jake, your brief thoughts on this season?
You know what? Controversial as it may sound, I'm not going to say we had a good season or anything like that.
We didn't.
No, we definitely didn't. But the problem that I think you have with the season is that it's 38 games, and how you end the season is often how people remember the season.
Yep.
And ultimately, okay, yes, we finished 8th. It's not good enough. Nobody thought we'd finish 8th. I was quite optimistic. Maybe I was the only Tottenham fan, but when it got to just before the break for the World Cup, I didn't think we were doing as badly as everyone said we were, because we were still 4th at that point. And I was looking at a lot of people like, oh yeah, but there's no way, we're not really 4th. And I'm thinking, no, we are 4th. We're 4th, and I don't care if it's because the other teams have been bad. We're still 4th, and you sort of, I didn't look at it as, we're going to now finish 6th. I really didn't. And maybe when Conte left, we were still 4th, and I thought that could be a problem. Who knows, if he'd stayed, we may well have finished 4th. I think that the way we started, if you flip that around, if we'd finished like that and started how we finished, if you see what I mean, we might think actually we've salvaged something this season.
Well, we did last season.
There you go.
And we flew into this season.
There you go.
But it means it counted for nothing.
So in the end, it's been a bad season, obviously, because we finished 8th. But halfway through, I wasn't really happy, but I was actually fine with where we were. We were well ahead of Liverpool. We were well ahead of Chelsea at that point. And I'm thinking, hold on, if you'd said to me after 12, 14 games, we're going to be 10 points ahead of Liverpool, or 10 points ahead of Chelsea, 5 points ahead of Liverpool, or whatever it was, I'd have taken that. Obviously, it's just gone that way since then. Yeah. So, not great. And obviously, Harry Kane. I mean, Harry Kane, forget our player of the season. Harry Kane, if Haaland wasn't here, would have been the Premier League player of the season.
He should be player of the season above Haaland. To do what he's done in that Tottenham team is beyond extraordinary. And just to pick up on Haaland, by the way, at one point in the season, people were tipping him to smash through the 40-goal barrier, I think last done by Clive Allen, right? And he fell short. So did Haaland have that wonderful a season in that magnificent City team? The fact that Kane is not player of the season is astonishing to me, and shows just some sort of bias or lack of knowledge somewhere in the chain, because he clearly should be player of the season, in my view.
Well,
in the Premier League.
I think listen, I think there's an argument either way. I think that Haaland, once he scored all those goals, firstly, people just look at the numbers, and secondly, I think it's the way that he's come in from first time. He's quite young. If he had been here 3 or 4 seasons, say, then maybe he wouldn't have won it this season, despite scoring all those goals.
I think it has to be him. He's been phenomenal. I know it's this City team, but he has.
Are you telling me you wouldn't take him at Tottenham?
No, of course, that's not the point. This is not about Erling Haaland, and I'm not sort of downplaying his achievements. I think in most seasons, what Haaland has done this season would stand head and shoulders above anybody else. But I think what Harry Kane has done, and I haven't looked at assists, but I can imagine if you throw assists or overall goal contribution.
He's actually had very few assists this season for him.
But I just think what Harry Kane has achieved this season in this Tottenham team supersedes what Haaland has done in an exceptional City team.
Sort of the point I'm trying to make, actually, is that I think because Kane has done it people just look at it and go, granted. That's the thing. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But they shouldn't.
I'm looking at it going, my goodness. He would have, I think, I can't remember which game it was, but I went to one of the Tottenham pressers maybe 4 games ago, and he'd already, in I think every season bar 3, he'd already won the Golden Boot, Kane.
It's phenomenal.
And there was 4 games to go. I think it might have been before the Palace game. There was still 4 games to go, and in any other season bar 4, he would already have won the Golden. It's ridiculous. And people look at him and go, oh yeah, he's Harry Kane, he scores goals. To be honest, I think that's now starting to, that kind of, the rubbish you'd hear from other fans is, is he that good? Is he overrated?
You still hear it.
I think that you do, but I think you're hearing it now. I think you're hearing it now a lot less, because people are going, hold on a second, he's passed Rooney in the Premier League.
I think there's this theory that Harry Kane's only a good footballer if he wins the League Cup with Man United, which is just utter nonsense.
I think, look, on this point, I have a bit of a media sort of paranoia perhaps, but I feel as though if Harry Kane had been playing for a Manchester United this season, then the debates about player of the season between him and Haaland would be much more heated and people would be paying much more attention to it. But because he's at Tottenham, the feats just aren't recognised quite as much for some reason. I don't know why. It might be my own paranoia, but I just genuinely feel that, if that was the case,
I think the point is if he was there, at Wembley, lifting the Carabao Cup or having scored a goal in the final, having started the FA Cup final for Man U, then I think you're right. I think that kind of adds points onto however you try and work it out. If you're a pundit or who even decides these things. But
the player of the season.
Yeah,
it's award. It's the players. It's the players.
Right. It's the players that. And you know what the other problem is. You know what the other problem is with this. I'm pretty sure is they vote on it in like February or March or something like that. So they don't even actually get a third of the season. I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that.
I was thinking that about goal of the season because Moore scores that brilliant goal, which probably should be one of the goals of the season, but they've already done their edits. Anyone scores a belter on the last day of the season probably doesn't even get a look.
You're not getting it. But yeah, I think that, and also the Haaland could end up winning the treble. That's the other thing. He's,
I get all of that, and I understand all of those points. I'm just looking at it purely objectively, and I just think that if I was to choose a striker for this season, based upon numbers and based upon what they've done for their teams, I would have Harry Kane's achievements above those of Erling Haaland.
I don't know. I disagree personally. I think it has to be Haaland based on the numbers. But anyway, we're all hoping Harry Kane's going to stay. Another man who is unlikely to stay on, certainly as manager, but we'll be delighted if he stays on in the staff. If that's the way it is Ryan Mason. Gary, Mason was sporting a round neck jumper this week. How do you feel about that? Are you going to get it?
I've been quite clear. I don't.
Quite clear. This is press conference stuff.
Very clear. I don't wear round necks. I don't wear round necks. I only wear hoodies, and I don't deck myself out in Tottenham garb. I don't particularly like it. It's just that one jumper. I saw it. I thought, wow, that's smart. Yeah, I think Ryan Mason's got fantastic fashion. I liked the jumper. Am I going to buy it? I'm very happy with
what you're trying to say is you're not dripping in club merch.
We know those types. That ain't me.
Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention in club news, I found the donut.
You what?
Yeah, but I didn't go to the Beyonce concert to find it. I found it in a petrol station in Uxbridge.
The donut, the same one, the very same one.
Well, they called it like a bomb bomb.
One, yeah.
But they called it like a bomb bomb. I don't know whether that's just like a marketing spiel. So I've kind of, I didn't buy it. It was like 11:30 at night. I was like, this is not the time for a donut. So I'm kind of saying I found it, but at the same time, I'm not. This search is not over until I found it at Spurs.
It's not over until you bring it to me.
Yeah, well, that's it. I will buy it at Spurs and bring it in. But anyway, I forgot to mention that in club news. Shoehorn that in.
You can just edit that in. It's fine.
I also mentioned at the top. I asked you, what are you pleased about that ended? For me, the chat about Poch coming back to Tottenham is now done. I'm so glad that's over. It's caused so many arguments on social media, and everyone has their different views. How do you feel, Jake, about Poch not coming back to Spurs? How do you feel about him going to Chelsea? I know you were there on Sunday against Newcastle. How was the atmosphere? How were their feelings on Poch?
Well, actually, they are, as you can imagine, pretty excited to be having Poch. I mean, why wouldn't you be? As a Spurs fan, I know what you mean. The talking's now stopped, but for me, until I don't even know when, you're going to see him in the dugout at Chelsea, and your Tottenham fans are going to be like, "Ugh, he's actually at Chelsea." I haven't got over it, quite frankly, not yet. Also, what are you going to want? You're going to want to see him do well. You're going to want to see Chelsea fail. Like, obviously, you want to see Chelsea fail, but you don't really want Poch.
I think there are fans out there who would be happy for him to succeed.
Yeah.
Maybe that would work if he went somewhere else. Obviously abroad, we'd be delighted for him, but not at Chelsea.
Listen, Chelsea, he's almost one of the... I know people say that he likes to work with a smaller squad, so they might actually end up shipping out some of their players. I think he's one of the most perfect managers for Chelsea, isn't he? Young players, a lot of them we've actually seen, it's taken a couple of them to kind of find their feet a bit. Like Madueke, all of a sudden, looks like a decent player. Obviously Enzo's fantastic. Conor Gallagher's a brilliant young player. And let's see what he can do with some of the others. I mean,
I couldn't really give a shit what he does for Chelsea, as long as it's bad, to be honest.
But I'm saying he's, lucky them is what I'm trying to say. He could be good for them. And I think, that was reflected in the general mood. I mean, I think Frank Lampard kind of looked looked like he was kind of ready to get out of there when I spoke to him at the end of the game.
Sure. Gary, thoughts on Poch going there and not coming back to Spurs?
I think not coming back to Spurs is the starting point for this, where I'm not upset that he hasn't come back to Spurs, and that might sort of cause upset amongst others, but I have strongly felt that Pochettino should not be considered to come back to Tottenham until every single last player that he coached is out of the squad. It wouldn't feel right. I think there would be preconceived feelings and loyalties and so on and so forth, and I think when he comes back it has to be with a completely clean slate. I also don't think we can ignore that the last season that he was here, yes, we got to a Champions League final, it papered over a lot of cracks. And there's another debate to be had. I know people say, but he had 2 windows where he didn't. I don't want to get into all of that. The reality of it is, it did drop off, and the ending when it did end was the right thing.
Was it?
It was, yeah.
Liverpool, there's no chance Liverpool were getting rid of Klopp this season, whether they'd finish 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th.
The problem I've got is the evening before the Champions League final, Pochettino wouldn't commit his own future to the club. Right, the evening before a Champions League final, when interviewed, and it's at that point I think we start to have these sort of glossy, rose-tinted specs when it comes to certain things in the past. But the guy could not commit his own future to our club on the eve of the Champions League final. That to me left a bit of a poor taste, and also didn't really get the whole atmosphere and feeling of that weekend off on the right foot. And I get a lot went on, but I think I think he needed a reset. I think he needed a break. I don't think he would have, reinvigorated himself and got there. So I do feel it was the right thing at that time. As to sort of not coming back now, like I say, I still don't think it's the right time for him to come back. I would have loved for him to come back in maybe 5 years' time or something like that, and gone on to take us to a level beyond what he achieved previously. But as to going to Chelsea, I perpetually and eternally want Chelsea to fail, and I think the next 5-10 years are actually going to end up being pretty painful for them. And I'm just sorry for Pochettino that he's going to be a part of that. I think it's a dreadful move for him, if I'm honest, and I think he's on a hiding to nothing. I'm
actually the same as you in terms of Poch coming back. I was never, we've got to get Poch back. They've got to move heaven and earth. I actually wondered if I'd like to see him back at Tottenham at one step, some point further down the line. And I actually sort of felt maybe I want him to manage 2 or 3 more clubs.
Well, no, he's gone to Chelsea, so the natural step is to go to Tottenham next.
I do. There's 2 things. One is if it does go badly, how does that make him more likely to come back to Tottenham? And does the fact that he's gone to Chelsea anyway? I know that we've had a lot of their managers, but it just now feels weird. Doesn't it feel now a bit weird if he comes back to Tottenham? He's not going to go from Chelsea to Tottenham anyway. I mean, maybe somewhere further down the line.
I think at this moment, I kind of agree with Johnny. The good thing about all of this is that we can draw a line under Poch, rightly or wrongly, and you can have your own views and opinions and whatever else. He didn't get the call. Whatever you feel about that, you've got to draw a line under it now, and it clearly was felt within the club that it wasn't the right time for him to go back, whatever their reasons, most of which we will probably never be privy to. Okay, it was felt within the club that it wasn't the right time. As to him now coming back at some point in the future, really is going to largely depend on what happens at Chelsea. If he goes on to win titles and that with Chelsea, I think that would be that. It would be done. Conversely, if he does crash and burn, what's the context of that? Is that a reflection of him as a manager and the job that he's done, or is he on a hiding to nothing, as I said before, which I think he probably is? If it doesn't go well, if it doesn't start right, and if within the next 12 months he's sacked, I don't think that closes the door on him coming back. So I don't think it would be a reflection on him in any way. And I think we have to get past these tribal issues of Pochettino is ours and so on and so forth, and look at what is right for us as a club at that time.
Okay, so there's the question. Brief answer, because we are going to go deeper on this. I'm sure in the next few weeks, if we don't get a manager in anyway, who do you want? None of the names inspire me, I've got to say. Who do you want now? Come on.
Well, who are the names that don't inspire you? Who are you?
I think Nagelsmann inspires me because he's a top manager. I'm not going to go down that word elite.
Is there still a suggestion that that's not dead? That's not a dead.
It can't be dead. I can't be dead. He doesn't have another club. There are no current openings for him really other than Tottenham. Napoli might become available. I'm not sure of his style. I don't see him there. I don't see a German
back at Bayern.
There's some no, he's burnt. I think he's burnt bridges there as well, from what you understand, from what you read.
Right.
Nagelsmann, I think, is just another. We need a great reset, and I don't think Nagelsmann is that man. I now would probably take Potter, I think, going back on the old Chelsea stuff. I really don't know. Nothing inspires me. Inspires me. Talk about Postecoglou from Celtic. Seems a good manager. The jury's out. I'm not going to go down, we could manage Celtic to the title. But anyway, it's not about me. It's about you. Who do you think?
I mean, I just don't know enough about Postecoglou in the sense that I don't watch any Scottish football, full disclosure. I know he got the job off the back of doing well with the Australian national team. And from what I understand, he does play progressive football. But yeah, sure. If people are saying he's good, fine. I've never been that against Brendan Rodgers, and I have to say, and I know he doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in a lot of Tottenham fans because of what happened at Leicester. But I think people forget that he got Leicester to 5th 2 seasons running, and he won the FA Cup with them, and he nearly won the league with Liverpool, playing some scintillating football. Yeah. Okay, not that very, very solid defensively. But, I think we could do a lot worse than Brendan Rodgers. He plays good football, attacking football. I think he's a very good manager. Whether you bring in this argument as that he has maybe a bit of a shelf life of 2 or 3 years before it kind of goes south, fine. I think we could do a lot worse. He's got a lot of Premier League experience. Tell me I'm wrong.
Okay. I don't know if you're wrong, but I think a lot could be looked into on the attacking side of his game. The numbers that they put up, the numbers that Leicester put up probably in the first couple of seasons. Yeah. Gary.
I personally wouldn't have any issues with Brendan Rodgers beside the fact that there's something about him that makes my skin crawl. But I think
a lot of people think that. I don't know about his character,
but I think he's a very good coach.
Yeah.
The answer to your question for me isn't so much
you don't like
about
the cut of his jib.
Apparently, he's got a big bust of himself in his hallway, which is just it's just cringy.
But maybe somebody gave it to him.
Oh, come on, you throw it out. Anyway, but the answer to your question, as far as I'm concerned, is not so much about who, but about what. And that is a question that I think Ryan Mason, if you listen to his words this week, has been already trying to answer. And I think it's been very interesting what he's been saying, and particularly when you match that up to the names that have been spouted through the various mediums. And what he's been saying is that we need to create an identity for the club again with the way that we play football. And it's something we've discussed in this pod over the last couple of weeks about having a director of football who oversees this coming manager, but then the next one and the next one and the next one. And what remains concurrent is the style and philosophy of the play. So what gives me a lot of positivity, rather than the who, is the fact that the names that have been linked generally do conform to a style of football that I think we would all wish to see. You think Nagelsmann, you think Rodgers, Potter, Schlott, Postecoglou, and even Enrique are the big 6, I think, that have come forward the most. Okay, possibly 1 or 2 others that I might forget.
Or of course, Poch had he come back.
But they all conform to coaches that actually want to train and develop players, want to play on a front foot style, and so on. When it comes to this great reset, I think it needs to be somebody that understands that we aren't going to be challenging for the league in the next couple of years. This is about ingraining a philosophy and a style of play over the course of the next season, the season after, and beyond that, okay? And as long as it is a manager that does conform to the way I think we wish to play both now and forevermore, really, then I don't think it would be the wrong appointment. What the wrong appointment would be, and I think it's more about what's the wrong appointment rather than the who is the right appointment. The wrong appointment would be, as we sort of touched on previously, a Thomas Frank who would seem to be a bit of a sort of, doesn't really follow any sort of line of thought. And again, it's nothing about Thomas Frank. It just doesn't conform to this is how we're going to play forevermore and going forwards. So whoever it is may feel underwhelming, but I retain a positivity that the direction of the club is one with focus and a purpose, and that's something that that ought to give us a feeling of optimism.
I actually think you've made me understand why I feel how I feel. So congratulations to you.
In the sense of how you feel.
Thank you. I feel a bit. I don't really mind who we get out of those people because they're all pretty similar. You know what we're going to end up getting is a progressive style of football. You know, everyone kind of pulling from the same hymn sheet, singing from the same hymn sheet. attacking, front foot, pressing, that kind of thing.
And
so there's not much to choose between any of them.
And overarching is the direction of the club going forward. So any manager, whether this manager comes in and fails, the next manager will be similar, and the one after that. And hopefully this manager that comes in will put in really solid foundations of how we're going to be playing going forwards. So what would success look like for this coming manager would be, for me, people would say, want a challenge for the league, want trophies, all that. What would look like success for me for this coming manager would be somebody that has the club ingrained in a way of playing from youth levels up, and really has that. And we've spoken a lot about the connection between the fans and the team. Harry Kane's spoken a lot about that. Ryan Mason's spoken a lot about that. If all of that starts coming back, then the next manager for me will have been a success, and the direction of the club will be positive. And so that's where I'm at.
Okay, look, we see a lot of stories on social media every day, different managers linked. There's another article written about another manager and who it should be and who it won't be, and why it's this one and why it won't be that one. We're going to talk now to we're going to talk now to a man who knows a lot. He's well versed in football writing and the media, and that is football writer Andrew Gaffney.
Thanks for having me on, guys. It's an honour.
Honour for us. Always interested in seeing your thoughts on the club on social media. So where are you? What are your overall thoughts on the season just gone, and where the club is, and maybe where we might go forward?
I would say in the modern era, and I know the modern sort of can span whatever people class as modern, but forgettable in every sense of the word. If you could sort of rub out the entire season, I don't think anyone would miss it. Apart from Arsenal's epic failure at the end, which has made it slightly enjoyable. On a Spurs perspective, depressing, I would say, from the optimism that I personally had at the end of the way we finished last season. I thought we were probably, alongside City, the best team in the league. To then start the season so slowly thinking, oh, we're just going to build up. There's a World Cup, trying to manage fitness levels, to it just never getting started. And the results have finally matched the performances, as much as people can say, oh, we was in the top four for so long. It was a false position. I think there was a lot of teams that were struggling, and I don't want to say took advantage of that, but we sort of coasted into fourth. We definitely didn't take hold of it and run away with it. We never begun. That's why the season's so forgettable, because it never really started. I think it was just an existence. Kane's scoring exploits were amazing, but I think an Emerson's sort of revival, though he obviously started quite low, I think everything else you could easily just ignore and pretend never happened, and no one would be worse for it.
Hi, Andrew. Right, well, let's just do that then. Let's ignore what we've just had to witness. I think that's a good way to go. Let's look ahead to next season, because, onwards and upwards, it can only get better. Or can it? Let's talk about Harry Kane, because it will only get better if he's in the side. But what if he's not? What if he's not there? I mean, the way I see it is I think he's probably going to end up staying. I wonder what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I still, maybe the hopeless optimist in me believes that he'll stay, just because I don't think there's the right option out there for him. I know people talk about Shearer's record being important to him, but I think a lot of his comments, when you listen to him about what he wants to achieve in his career, whilst the records are nice, he does lack those titles. And I think the only guarantee in England is Manchester City. And
absolutely
that
correct.
door is now closed with Haaland being there. And I still personally, and I know we're all biased, think Kane's a better striker than Haaland. I know the numbers don't lie, but I think if you'd have put Kane in that team, he would have got similar numbers. I just think, I don't say maybe more, because I think it's a freak season.
Well, he got similar numbers in a worse team, Premier League.
Yeah, and I think that's what I mean. 30 goals for Tottenham. That obviously, if you look at the output of our other forwards and any form of, and I'm using this loosely based on this year, creative midfielders, his sort of record is sensational, and it shows how much of a freak of nature he is. I don't know if he'd be tempted to move abroad. Obviously, he's got a young family. I think that is a factor, as much as Kane probably has ambitions of wanting to win leagues in other places. I do think he's got unfinished business. So I sort of feel like by default, Spurs will get another year. And obviously that opens the door to an extremely painful departure if he would choose a team that maybe we'd all rather he didn't. But I think Spurs have got a chance to give him a huge pay rise, maybe give him just sort of like a 2-year deal, but with an option for him to leave at the end of next season if we're not in the Champions League or a certain thing. You know, the fact is, current contract didn't have a sort of break clause at a certain point for failure to reach the Champions League. Is incompetence on his brother's part, which we're all grateful for. but we are so fortunate to have kept Harry Kane for as long as we have. And he owes us nothing. And I don't think any Spurs fan believes that he has to stay. But I just think in a Spursy fashion for him, there aren't really many options available. Right. Manchester United, yes, a much bigger name, but it's almost sidestepping. Because they could easily drop off and have a Spurs season. Don't like to use it in some sort of like that's a noun, a Spurs season, or an adjective. But Spurs could also, if we get it right in the summer, rebound and make that top 4. I don't think anything's sort of guaranteed aside from City being first or second.
I think you're 100% right. But let's talk about Spurs getting it right, because you know there is so much information out there on a daily basis that's being pushed constantly by, you know, links to this one, links to that one, rumours about this one's now rejected, and so on and so forth. How do you know, sat there, disseminate that information and sort of think to yourself what is correct and what isn't? Because this time last week everybody was it's slot, and Wednesday morning suddenly it wasn't slot, and everybody's coming out with stories about why managers don't want to join Tottenham. So sitting there, what does getting it right look like, and how do you digest the vast volumes of information that's being pushed on social media by way of what might be true?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is true. It's like it's slot, and then it's not. It's sort of there's. I think my personal opinion is there's a void of information now. That could be that Spurs are doing nothing. And I really, really hope that's not the case.
Seems unlikely.
Or there's a lack of information getting out, and it's only crumbs that people have to use to. And again, we're very fortunate. I'd just like to preface this that we're very fortunate on the Spurs beat. There's a lot of very good journalists, a lot of reliable and respectable ones. But I don't think there's a lot coming out from the club, which is a positive, I suppose. But it's a frustration for fans who are desperate for something. So they're almost filling the void of, well, this guy's available, is done well, he's never dismissed the chance that he'd want to go to Spurs, is in the running, and then as soon as they either say, actually, I'm going to stay, or I'm going to sign a new contract, it's like, well, he never really wanted it anyway. Spurs are going to struggle. I don't think Spurs will struggle, but I think the one thing that's it's the first time I've heard anyone at Tottenham say it really since Poch left, and I'm not going to class Daniel Levy's letters to the fans because they seem hollow at the moment. Mason saying that we need to rediscover identity and how we want to play, and that is key. That it's not, let's just get a big name, because big names don't work. And it's so infuriating because Levy's system was get a manager who can develop young players, sell 1 or 2 for profit, but keep the thing churning and constantly unearth this new talent and say, this is where you want to be. Almost like a Dortmund type thing, which I know is funny based on what happened at the weekend. But I sort of think that we went away from that and completely ripped up our identity that we got, which you could say it was the right time to cut ties with Poch because it did get bad. But to then completely change how we played and system and ask the players to do something different and then ask them again to change, there's no clear direction of where we're going. And I think that's more important than getting a name that people recognize, whoever it is. It has to be someone who fits into the philosophy of how we want to play, how the players will know. And if that manager didn't work out, well, the next one's going to continue that same idea of we're going to play attacking football, fluid football, counter-attack, whatever it is, rather than just a name that sounds good. Because I think we've proven pretty rotundly that it doesn't work. It definitely doesn't work at Spurs. You have to get the right attitude, the right idea, and everyone has to go in the right direction. And at the moment, there isn't one.
So I think that's something that's been reinforced on this pod over the last couple of weeks is that's crucial and critical. But just quickly going back to the possibility of Kane staying at the end of his contract, which means we have to have a good season, which means we have to get it right. From your personal point of view, either based on the rumours that you've seen on the rumour mill or just generally a name of your own, who would you think can get it right and get us back to where we need to be?
I'm still, and again, I happy clapper used to be the term on Twitter, but I like to enjoy watching Spurs, so I try and find something positive. And I think the only name that I've heard that I think inspires me to think we could build something special is Nagelsmann. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name properly. Like lots of people, I've only seen parts of his team, but they play enjoyable football, and it feels almost cutting edge. I don't necessarily. I know there's a few names going around, and people criticize CVs and stuff. For me, Nagelsmann feels like the new Poch, which is what the original idea was. We're not going to bring back Poch, or not at this point anyway, clearly. But that Nagelsmann would be the idea of someone who'll have a new philosophy, ingrain it throughout the team. He'll have a stamp, even if he's involved in the director of football search, as long as it aligns with what Spurs want to do. I don't really care. I mean, I think that is vitally important that they are on the same page, because I think we've experienced that before, that we've had directors of football that bring lots of players in, but there's no clear identity of what we're doing. And the managerial search based on the rumours is similar, that there is no real direction. You go from like 3 or 4 different names that play different types of football, and how can you expect to get a director of football in? You would think director of football would be crucial first, and not talking to somebody who's skating around illegal charges for what he's been doing at other clubs, and ignoring him completely. No consultancy. Get somebody brand new in. We need to sort of get the core right. So Nagelsmann's the only one that I think, as much as it was sort of like semi-ruled out, I don't think he ever came out. I would imagine he just sort of said, the way you're presenting it to me, it doesn't interest me. But the door's still open that if you do present a project, similar to like Conte was a year or so ago, when he initially refused because he didn't feel the timing or the situation was right, he came in when he had more power to say, look, you've tried, it's me or no one, you need to sign me, but I want this. And Levy and the structure might need that, because I think I've generally defended his decisions, especially business-wise. I think fantastic. The infrastructure has meant that buoyancy period where we did wrestle or rub shoulders with the elite, it wasn't a flash in the pan. We've got the base there to never really, we shouldn't really ever fall too far away.
Great.
But I do think football-wise, he's got it so incredibly wrong post-Poch.
Just one final thing, Andrew. I know you spent a lot of time in Spain, lived there for a number of years. One name's linked a little bit, but not pushed out too much, is Luis Enrique. I just wondered your thoughts on him. He seems to have divided opinion on what style would his style work at Tottenham. Pass, give the ball away, can see the goal. What are your thoughts on Luis Enrique, and would he be a fit for Tottenham?
I mean, I think it's important to say that all the names that are linked with Tottenham, none of them are bad coaches. It's, again, back to, do they fit what Spurs want to do? And I do have question marks about Luis Enrique. I think when you have a lot of time out of club football, it's very difficult to get back in. We've seen in 2 or 3 years, we've gone from like Mourinho, and I know obviously Mourinho's in another final, but his style of football hasn't worked in England for a while, because new generations come through. There's new ideas. We've seen it with De Zerbi at Brighton this year, bringing it through. You constantly have to evolve. So when you're out of it for 3 or 4 or 5 years, you're catching up already. And I don't think Spurs have I don't say the quality, because I think there is quality in this squad. I don't think we have the right players to make a tiki-taka thing. You look at Spain's squad, and they definitely fell short of where they should. It was lots of possession, heavy possession, but no cutting edge. And Spurs, yes, we've got Harry Kane that makes that cutting edge, but you have to have a system that I think gets the best out of everyone. And the only time he's, for me, really excelled was at Barcelona. And it's so difficult to judge a manager during that golden period of having like a Neymar, Messi, Suarez. Because I'm not saying anyone could have won, because that's one of those things like, oh, you put me in Man City, I'd scored 20 goals. And it's like, no, you wouldn't. And I don't think and he did change the system that went definitely a bit more direct. But I think having that level of quality is very different to having to, because we do need a rebuild and we need recoaching some of the players. I think there's quality there. But you've seen the difference of, like, obviously Unai Emery at Aston Villa. Once you get a coach in who tells people how he should play, how it all works, and the system works. We tried to do it really late with Mason, which I think is probably like I'm not saying Ryan Mason personally, but like a FIFA manager, I can just put any formation and it'll work because these players know how to do it. But you have to work as a unit, and I think like the Brentford game, which I only saw highlights of, it showed the first half there. But once it started to unravel, there was no answer because they're not used to it. They don't know where they need to be. And I think that's why pre-season is massive, and it has to be the right coach. But I personally would stay clear of Luis Enrique. I think, again, nice guy, but he's very brash. I think he would cause issues if we started to struggle or we had a slow start to the season. And I think there probably is the possibility that it will be a bit of a teething process at the start, but we all just want to believe that it's building towards something good, whereas I don't think that would happen under Luis Enrique's style of football. I don't think it really complements us too much. It's passing, but it's not pass and run.
Right. Well, Andrew, really interesting to get your thoughts on all things Tottenham and where we might be going. Another season ends, a new era, and maybe once we get a new manager in and the season starts, we'd be delighted to get you on once again.
Yeah, hopefully we can we need to go one of them Men in Black little pens, don't we, and just erase the last 12 months and enter with the optimism that we did at the end of the previous season with Conte, and think this could be, because I genuinely said that I thought we could have had the season that Arsenal have had. Yeah. It was going to be weird with the World Cup in the middle, and we should have kicked on, and we had, by all accounts, everyone was quite happy with the transfer window, and it just never started. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I mean, we're all probably looking at crossing our fingers that if City win the Champions League, maybe Pep walks, needs a break, and then there's chaos. We can rise like the Phoenix and have that moment.
Well, the optimism.
We live in hope, Andrew. Really good to talk to you, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Really good to get Andrew's thoughts.
He hasn't cheered me up, that's for sure. A lovely guy, not his fault.
I was interested to hear about Enrique because he's someone who we've not been linked with that much, but he's got a good CV. I don't know how important the CV really is, and Andrew made that point, but look, good to get his thoughts. Moving forward, next week we're going to do an in-depth review of the season. We've talked about how bad the season was, but I'm going to set you both some homework. Ooh. I want you.
Excuse me.
I want you to go away, and I don't want you to go away. I want you to go away and come back with 3 positives from this season, but you cannot mention Harry Kane. Okay?
What?
You have to. There must be something. I don't want you to mention it now, but there must be something. So we're going to talk about that next week. How do you feel about it?
Not great. It's like an impossible task. What?
All right, well, I tell you what. Give me one now. Give me a positive. Come on. Give me a positive from this season.
Does that mean you only want 2?
Season ended. You can mention one now.
Is it actually another 3? So you've got to find 4. Is that what you really want?
No, I want 3, but we'll have 1 now and 2 next week.
Okay. So the season ended doesn't count.
No, it doesn't count. On the pitch.
Ugh. Basuma.
Okay.
Go on.
Okay.
Yours.
Well, okay.
No, I love him. I think he's a fantastic player. We haven't utilised him. We haven't seen him. I think he's a sensational signing at the time. I mentioned that the other week, and I think we're going to see him really grow and develop, particularly with a manager that wants to play good football, possession-based football. And I think Yves Bissouma has shown in the last couple of weeks, as he gets fitter and fitter, how he can really be a fulcrum of that team.
You love Bissouma. You've mentioned him every
I love the
single
idea of Bissouma and Bentancur.
Yeah.
I think that looks like a phenomenal central midfield partnership, and one that inspires me and gives me a lot of hope.
And as a Sunday League midfielder of your ilk, then
I was more Stefan Freund.
Come on.
Oh, he had a good throw-in.
I didn't have a good throw-in.
Right.
He actually had a really bad throw. It was the shortest long throw-in I'd ever seen. Right, Gary's given us one of his 3, and that's Yves Bissouma. Jake, something positive from this season
Yeah.
that is not, it's finished,
Yeah.
on the pitch, please.
Similar token, I'm going to go with Porro, the signing of Pedro Porro.
Okay, nice.
It's a bit of an indictment that neither of our 2 choices played that many games and yet have been a positive across the season. And I do worry that the new manager, that he won't suit the new manager's style, because if the new manager comes in and doesn't want to play with a wing back,
We've got problems.
he's not a right back. And it's not, you're not looking at him going, "Ooh, he doesn't look like a right back." He wasn't a right back.
Well, it's very
We
difficult.
didn't sign him as a right back.
I think it's very difficult to turn someone from a wing back to a right back.
Yeah.
It's easier to do it the other way.
Maybe, but the where he played the other day, basically playing as he was almost like an extra winger.
I wonder if the chat from Kulusevski about an uncertain future is actually the club now considering Porro as more of a right winger than a right back, and therefore Kulusevski becomes surplus to requirements.
Maybe.
He looks, and I thought this from the when I saw him the first game that he played. You can tell he technically looks very good. He looks like going forward, he makes the right decisions. He gets into the right areas. He makes the right runs down. He's played his whole career attacking, and he's produced. He's got a couple of goals.
3 goals.
There you go. He's got 3 goals.
Few assists.
Couple of assists.
Yep.
I think he looks like as long as we can play him in the right position, he could be something.
Yeah,
to
your
look
assumption there, Gary, is that the club has actually given any thought to next season. We hope they have. It's all very quiet, as Andrew said. But look, something's going to have to happen soon. Next week, we are going to do a deeper dive into the season, analyse it a lot deeper. But you have 2 more positives to find for next week. Gentlemen, thank you once again for joining me. We go again next week, and up the Spurs.